Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Today is the 2nd of April 2025, and this is a new update video on the situation in Syria and the broader Middle East. I truly hate to say that I told you so, because this comes from a position of arrogance and even patronizing. However, I predicted, this was in December 11th, 2024, that the al-julani regime will eventually normalize ties with Israel, and we will see the Israeli flag eventually flying over the skies of Damascus. Of course, this has been criticized widely by the al-julani people and also the people who hate al-julani, right? There was this certain level of wishful thinking in the aftermath of the fall of Assad. But I predicted this because it is easy to really follow and detect the patterns in the region, the sequence of events, the players, both regional and international, and also the local players. So who supported the al-julani army, which regional powers, was their interest in Syria, and what was the role of Israel at the start of this conflict in the country. Now, all in all, I truly believed that this has been to establish a new Middle East. And one of the reasons for it is because Syria rejected to normalize ties with Israel and also supported the Palestinian and Lebanese armed factions against Israel. This was the core issue why they initiated the regime change war, in my opinion, because they wanted to redraw the map of the Middle East. And we are watching it now daily on our television, how they are dividing and conquering or conquesting new territories, especially from the Israeli side, with the hope that they could kill the Palestine issue forever, and also to attack Iran as the last country standing against, let's say, the American hegemony in the region. On the 11th of December, as I mentioned, I was on RT International and I predicted this. I said, I'm going to make a bold prediction. And the journalist or the host was really surprised. And I said, I believe that between 3 to 5 years, al-julani will normalize ties with Israel, and we will see the Israeli flag flying over the region. Unfortunately, I cannot show you the video because YouTube is very strict with its so-called laws and regulations, and they don't allow any RT international content, although in previous videos I blurred the logo, and despite that they detected it and they took it down, and they even threatened me with a strike and even taking down my channel forever. Therefore, I'm not going to show you the video, but I'm going to play the video now on my smartphone while you can hear the volume on my this microphone. So let's take a look and listen together what I said back then. I believe now Syria is a fertile ground for every regional country to establish and achieve its regional and strategic goals. And one of these players is Israel. And Israel long was waiting for this moment. After Egypt joined the peace agreements with the Israeli side, there was no other army. There were only two other armies represented a threat against Israel, were Iraq and Syria. And both of them are already destroyed. And this is part of the UN plan, which was spoken and discussed in length in Israel. And I think Israel will thrive more, and it will have an upper hand over the region, especially after the genocide in Gaza and the killing and the assassinations of the leadership of Hezbollah. And now that Iran is withdrawing from Syria, I think Syria will revolve under the umbrella or the orbit of the US, and Israel will have a high leverage. I just want to make a bold prediction, which I might be wrong, but I believe that between 3 years to 5 years from now, we will see an Israeli flag flying over Damascus, and Israel will have its own embassy, and therefore the new Syria will normalize ties with Israel in the near future. So the new Syria will normalize ties with Israel. Yesterday, on the 1st of April, and this is not the April's Fool, Ariel Oseran, he is an Israeli journalist, Middle East correspondent for I-24 News. He says, scoop, the new Syrian government is engaged in efforts to establish backchannels with Israel. A Syrian source with knowledge of the matter tells me. These efforts are aimed at laying the groundwork for potential normalization between Syria and Israel, and are taking place with the support of Saudi Arabia. I'm not surprised at all, but I wasn't sure that this report is accurate, or probably it is a carrot that the Israelis usually throw in the public discourse discussion so that the people would pick up this carrot and discuss it, and they want to see the public opinion. And what is the opinion of the Syrians? What is the opinion of the people who like Jolani, who dislike Jolani? What is the opinion of the Saudi government? Because they say the Saudis are mediating. I said probably it's just a carrot. It's not factual. But we received today multiple reports from different personalities, some of which is in Israel. For example, Eddie Cohen, who is another Israeli journalist and researcher. He says US President Donald Trump will meet with the new Syrian president, Ahmed Shara. Ahmed Shara is the Abu Muhammad al-Julani, immediately after his visit to Israel in mid-May. And the meeting is going to be in Saudi Arabia with the mediation of Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Another journalist, I don't think he's a journalist, but anyways, Mario Naufal also picks up these reports from I-24 News of Israel and says Trump to meet Syrian President al-Shara in Saudi Arabia. And this has been arranged by MBS. Trump will hold a landmark meeting with Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara during his upcoming visit to Israel to Saudi Arabia in May. The meeting was personally brokered by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, signaling a potential diplomatic shift in the region. The White House confirmed Trump's Middle East tour this week, with further details to follow soon. This will mark the first non-engagement between US and Syrian leaderships in years, underlining Riyadh's growing role as a regional power broker. Now, I just want to show you first the video reportage on I-24 of Israel, and I will come back and give my commentary.
Now we're seeing still a significant presence of HTS, but much less. We're seeing more openness to different minorities, to Christians, to Druze, albeit there's only one woman, but she's a woman who's been heading interfaith dialogue, actually the Interfaith Dialogue Center at George Mason University in Virginia. She's a dual Canadian Syrian citizen. And we see that this is really an attempt by the Syrian government to try and show a new face, a face that allows inclusiveness, that aims towards openness inside Syria. Now, this isn't, a rosy future. There's obviously a lot of challenges for this government, and still we have a significant presence of HTS. But Syrian political sources that I'm talking to, they are pleased with this government. They say that this is a good step in the right direction following a series of positive steps. What does this mean for Israel? For Israel, obviously, it wants to see as few HTS elements as possible in the government. But what I can say this evening is that this current government is already trying to establish back channels with Israel to try and move forward with some sort of normalization with Israel. I can even go as much as saying that these same sources believe that normalization between Syria and Israel is more likely to happen than normalization with Lebanon. And we know that Israel and Lebanon are currently engaged in diplomatic discussions to demarcate the border, which is seen as a first step. So obviously there are many challenges moving forward with regards to Israel and also internally rebuilding an unstable country, but another positive step as Syria moves forward in its rebuilding efforts.
It certainly would be historic indeed. Very briefly, from a security perspective, that level of normalization would be a major boon. Break down what that means very briefly.
Well, we have to also remember the context. Syria is considered the #1 foreign policy issue for Saudi Arabia, and it would be expected that such a step would be kind of setting the stage for potential Israeli-Saudi normalization down the line. We know that the Saudis are putting a lot of effort in the current governance and shaping of Syria moving forward. Normalization is not only on the table, but there are already attempts to try and establish some sort of dialogue with Israel in that matter.
So as you can see, this is what happened in Syria had nothing to do with democracy, human rights, and all the BS, let's call it a BS, that you have heard on your mainstream press for a long time, for 14 years, that they have to oust Assad because he is a dictator, like he's committing human rights violations. I mean, Jolani has just committed a genocide against the Alawites and the Christians in the coastal cities, and before that, he has been the leader of the Al Qaeda offshoot in Syria and in Iraq. What really matters is geopolitics, and in this case, Jolani's handlers, basically in the US, in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, in Turkey, they have told him that he has to make peace with Israel. And this is the same case that they have been trying to persuade and convince Assad for a long time. Now, in 2018, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and other countries opened up again to Syria's Assad. And the reason for it was they tried with military means and they have weakened the regime to the maximum level. And now they can probably convince him to normalize ties with Israel and join the so-called moderate Arab camp. So the countries which normalized relations with Israel, whether tacitly or publicly. And in this case, it's very important to mention that while Israel is interested in, let's say, striking a deal with Syria in order to, let's say, neutralize any possible threat coming from Syria in the future, some people may ask, why should Jolani negotiate with Israel? What can he give to Israel, right? Why should the Israelis negotiate with Jolani to begin with? Now, some people say, has Jolani given up on the Golan Heights? I would tell you, Golan Heights have been settled. The issue is settled for the Americans and the Israelis for a long time. They were not intending to give the Golan Heights to Syria any longer, so they don't negotiate about the Golan Heights. Now, some people come and say, so what about the Mount Hermon? Mount Hermon is already occupied by Israel now, and they have annexed it, and they will not negotiate over the Mount Hermon because they know that Jolani doesn't pose any threat and he doesn't have any military capability to fight against Israel and liberate Mount Hermon. So what are the Israelis then negotiating with Jolani? I would tell you the following. First, Jolani is interested in negotiations because he wants the endorsement of the Trump administration. So he could tell Trump that he will normalize ties with Israel and he may accept tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from the Gaza Strip in exchange for long-term American commitment, bipartisan, that they will not wage any, let's say, regime change war or destabilize Syria in the future, headed by Abu Muhammad al-Jolani. But at the same time, the Americans and the Israelis know that Jolani is in a very vulnerable situation and he needs this so-called legitimacy or endorsement from the Americans and the Israelis. So they will play with him the following game. They will allow him to have control over the city of Damascus, to Homs, Hama, Aleppo, and Idlib. These places which he already, let's say, technically and theoretically controls, they will allow him to stay there for a long time. However, when it comes to the situation of Asweda with the Druze, the Israelis will press the Americans to ask Jolani for a special status for the Druze in Asweda, whether through federalism or Balkanization. The same thing goes with the Kurds. However, the issue of the Alawites is still tricky because the Alawites do not really have one leadership, someone who could represent them and represent their interests. They don't have a political party. They don't have even a militia or an army to defend themselves. They're in a very vulnerable situation, and there is no regional or international power backing them. No one is supporting them, basically. Unlike the Druze, supported by the US and Israel, the Kurds are supported by the US and Israel. The Alawites have no one in their back, not even Hezbollah, not even Iran, no one. So they're in a very vulnerable situation in this case. So let's see how the issue of the Alawites will be settled in the coastal cities. This is just my 2 cents. Let me know your opinion about this. Do you think that Jolani will normalize ties with Israel? And if he does so, what do you think is going to be the reaction of the people who pretended to be pro-Palestine for the past year, meanwhile supporting the Jolani regime and saying he is this liberator of the Syrian people. And especially the Palestinians who supported Jolani. What do you think it's going to be their reaction when they hear that Jolani has turned out to be just an asset for the United States and Israel, just like I said he is for a very long time? Are they going to apologize? I doubt. Anyways, this was all for today, guys. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you like my content and the analysis I'm presenting here, this is an independent work. You can simply just hit the like button, subscribe to this YouTube channel. We are around 2,000 subscriptions away from 100K goal. Let's see if YouTube is going to send me this, whatever is called the silver plate or whatever. And yeah, if you like to do more and support this channel, you have different means in the description below. And I will see you tomorrow with Firas Mu'dad. We're going to do live streaming, 1.5 hours of brilliant geopolitical discussion with him. I watched his last podcast on a British podcast. He was brilliant. I learned a lot from him myself. I don't necessarily agreed with him on some of his opinions, so we're going to have a chit chat together. And yeah, stay tuned. If you're interested, subscribe. And tomorrow on Thursday, 5 p.m. Central European Time, 11 a.m. Eastern American Time, I'm going to do this as a live stream. Peace be upon you, upon your families. Salam.